Have you ever felt like you gave her everything? Your time, your love, your protection, even parts of yourself you never gave to anyone else. And yet, she walked away. Not for someone richer, not for someone stronger, but for someone completely different. Maybe he was chaotic, broke, lost in his own world, but there was something about him, something untamed, that drew her in, and you're left standing there wondering, what did I do wrong? I've been there. I've watched men I love, good men, be passed over, left behind, replaced by someone who made no sense on paper. There was Tom, 59, solid, faithful, the kind of man who still opened the car door and called every night just to say goodnight. He dated a woman for 6 months, thought they were building something real. Then, out of nowhere, she fell for a guy who brewed craft beer in his garage and hadn't held a steady job in 5 years. Tom looked at me and said, I did everything right, but I never felt like I was it for her, like she was always looking past me. That's when I realized, maybe it wasn't about the man, maybe it was about the myth. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, believed that love and desire don't play by the rules of logic. They're not about resumes or routines. They're not even about you. They're psychological, archetypal, mythical. And if you really want to understand why women desire the men they do, especially when it defies reason, you have to go deeper, beneath the surface, into the unconscious. Let's go there. I used to believe the same things most men believe, that if you're a good man, steady, honest, loyal, she'll stay. That if you treat her right, she'll never leave. Because that's what we were told, wasn't it? Be confident, make more money, be the alpha. You hear it at the gym, at poker night, even from men who've been married for 30 years, but haven't felt truly seen in the last 10. But here's the part nobody tells you. There are men, good, grounded men, who do everything right, and still end up alone. I saw it happen to my friend Mike. He's 62, former contractor, built houses for a living and a damn good life for himself. He met a woman through a community outreach event at his church. She was elegant, warm, a widow who loved classic rock and red wine. Mike treated her like gold, took her dancing, helped install shelves in her garage, cooked her lemon chicken every Sunday, even drove her to her mammogram appointment and waited in the parking lot just to be there when she came out. 3 months in, he booked them a weekend in Carmel by the sea. That same week, she ended it. I don't feel that spark, she said. Spark. That one word, enough to collapse a man's heart. Mike was crushed. He looked at me, eyes red, voice low. I don't get it. I've never treated anyone better, and the worst part, he hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, he'd done everything right. That's when it hit me. Maybe this isn't about what we do. Maybe it's about what we awaken, because women don't. Just respond to how you behave. They respond to something deeper, something they don't even realize they're chasing. Archetypes. Inner blueprints. Old stories. Buried in the unconscious, not always about the man in front of her. Sometimes it's about the one she's been dreaming of since childhood, the one who lives in her memories, her unmet needs, her emotional fantasies. And if you don't match that image, even if she can't name it, something inside her will feel off. Not wrong, just not right. You'll feel it. That sense of her slowly turning away, even when nothing's gone wrong. That invisible comparison, not to another man, but to an idea. And you'll feel like you're losing to someone who doesn't even exist. So if Mike gave his best and still lost her, if Tom never felt truly seen, I had to ask myself, what were these women really responding to? Not just actions, not words, but something deeper, something unconscious. That's when I started digging into Jung. And what I found didn't just explain desire, it explained everything. I want to take you back to a quiet evening just outside Sedona, Arizona, a men's retreat tucked away in the desert. The kind of place where phones lose their signal and silence finally has space to speak. We sat around a fire as dusk settled. The air was dry, the stars unhurried, and for once, no one was pretending to be okay. That's where I met Mark. He was 60, silver-bearded, with hands that told stories long before his mouth did. Navy vet. The kind of man who spent decades protecting people and forgetting how to protect himself. He told me about the woman he met at a grief support group. Her husband had passed years earlier. She laughed quietly, wore old denim jackets and loved Van Morrison. She said Mark made her feel safe, and he tried. God, he tried. He cooked for her, listened without interrupting, held her on nights when she broke down in tears. He gave her the best version of himself, and then she left. Not for someone more successful, not for someone younger. She left for a man who painted murals on adobe walls and lived out of a van in Taos. Man who played guitar under desert skies and spoke in riddles about stars and pain and passion. Mark wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter, but he was broken. She looked at me and said, "You're everything I ever wanted, but I can't feel it." He stared into the fire after he said it, like he was trying to burn the memory down with the wood. Jung believed that deep within every human being lives a collection of unconscious patterns. He called them archetypes, inner templates that shape the way we see others and the way we love. For women, one of the most powerful archetypes is what Jung called the Animus, the masculine image within her psyche. It's not a checklist, it's something far more primal, a myth stitched together from childhood memories, books she once loved, wounds she never healed, and dreams she never admitted aloud. This Animus doesn't always wear the same face. Sometimes he steps out of her imagination as the hero, fearless and untouchable, the kind of man who makes the ground feel steadier just by walking across it. Other times, he arrives as the mystic, soft-spoken, poetic, eyes like deep wells of knowing, stirring her heart with things that have no names. There are days he shows up as the rebel, wild and electric, a man who threatens the safety of her world but promises a kind of aliveness she's forgotten. Then again, he may take the shape of the father, strong, steady, carrying the weight of the world like it's nothing, reminding her of a protection she always longed for but never had. Or perhaps he appears as the savior, the imagined rescuer, the one who will finally see through her defenses and heal what others broke. Let me ask you, have you ever felt like she was chasing something you couldn't see? Drop a yes in the comments if you've ever heard the words, "It's not you, it's just something's missing." That sentence, as soft as it sounds, has broken more good men than betrayal ever could. Mark didn't know this, neither did I, not until much later, but sitting there with him, I realized what had happened. She hadn't left him because he failed. She left because, in her unconscious mind, he didn't match the myth. He was real, solid, present. But she wasn't in a relationship. She was inside a story, and Mark, he was never the main character in that story. He was the placeholder, the safety net, the gentle stop between chapters. She wasn't chasing a man. She was chasing a ghost, and that ghost had nothing to do with reality. I see it now. In hindsight, it's painfully obvious. She needed to feel swept away. Not safe, not held, but moved, undone, lit up from the inside, and Mark, bless his heart, brought calm where she longed for chaos. This is the part we men struggle with most. We think if we give our best, our loyalty, our steadiness, our devotion, it should be enough. But when you're up against an archetype, when you're standing in front of a woman who's projecting an entire world onto you, logic doesn't stand a chance. She's not looking at you, she's looking through you. And what she sees has more to do with her past than your presence. That's why so many good men, especially older men, end up confused, hurt, disoriented. We, Think we were in a relationship built on shared reality, when really we were cast in a role we didn't audition for. This doesn't make her cruel, it makes her human. Just as we carry wounds we don't fully understand, so do they. Just as we chase symbols of redemption, they do too. But here's the tragedy. When you don't understand the animus, you think it's about you. You think you were boring, or not masculine enough, or too old, too calm, too predictable, and the truth is, you were probably all the right things, just not the symbol her unconscious was aching for. That's why Jung's insight matters. Because once you see that love is not always about reality, but about projection, you stop blaming yourself for someone else's dream. You stop contorting yourself to become a ghost you never agreed to be, and you start asking the question that matters most: who am I? When I'm no longer trying to be someone else's idea of a man. That, my friend, is where healing begins. So today, we've walked through some tough truths: that doing everything right isn't always enough, that women carry unconscious myths, and sometimes we're cast in roles we never chose, and that healing begins not when she sees us, but when we finally see ourselves. So let me ask you something, man to man. Have you ever looked back on a relationship and wondered, was I really loved? Or was I just filling a role? Have you ever felt like no matter how much you gave, how present you were never the right kind of man in her eyes, like she wasn't really seeing you, just the story she wanted to live out? I know that feeling. It messes with your head, makes you question your worth, makes you want to shut down, walk away from connection altogether. But here's what I've learned. You are not alone. There are thousands of men out there, men who've felt invisible in their own relationships, men who've been the good guy, the safe guy, and still ended up as a footnote in someone else's fairy tale. And maybe that was never your fault. Your story matters, and when you speak it, you give permission for other men to stop hiding theirs. So I want to hear from you, right here, in the comments. Have you ever felt like you were just playing a part in her story? Not your own? What role do you think she was projecting onto you? What did it take for you to finally see it? Write it down, share it, because someone out there needs to read it today, to know they're not the only one, and maybe, just maybe, that someone is you. Carl Jung didn't give us a manual for love. What he gave us was something more valuable: a map. Not a map to control other people, but a way to understand ourselves, to see where our wounds come from, to recognize the stories we're living in, and to step outside of the roles we never chose. Because when a woman doesn't see you, when she leaves chasing someone else, sometimes it's not about rejection, it's about misalignment, projection, two people trying to write the same story, but in different languages. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can keep trying to fit her myth, or you can begin to live your truth. You can keep asking, why wasn't I enough? Or you can finally ask, what kind of life? What, oh, kind of love lets me stay true to myself? So the next time you feel that old pain stirring, that sting of being replaced or overlooked, take a breath and remember this: she may have been seeing someone inside her own mind, but now you get to see you clearly, fully, finally. That's not an ending. That's the beginning of something real.